Every strain sitting in a dispensary today was grown indoors, under lights, in a room somebody controls down to the degree. That's just how it's done now. But it wasn't always like that. The best weed America ever saw came off a mountainside in Thailand, grown in the sun by farmers who'd been doing it that way for generations. And it didn't come to you in a jar. It came tied to a stick. This is the story of Thai stick. So the first thing you've got to understand is that a Thai stick wasn't a strain sitting in a jar. It was a handmade object. Somebody took premium seedless buds of Thai sativa and skewered them onto a thin sliver of bamboo. Then they wrapped the whole thing tight, using fiber they had stripped off the stem of the plant itself, or sometimes silk thread. Now the sizing of this thing was surprisingly consistent, and we know that because the guys who moved them by the thousand can still give you the numbers. Mike Ritter, an ex-smuggler who ran these for years, puts a typical stick at about 5.5 inches, which is about the size of a cigar, and that's exactly what a lot of people thought it was when it first came out. Because of the way it looked, but in all honesty, tying bud to a stick was just how they packaged it. Nobody out there had scales or bags, so a bundle of 20 was just how you bought it and how you sold it. Nobody was weighing anything. And most people who got one just pulled the buds off the stick and smoked them like normal weed. Which brings me to another misconception about these sticks. You may have heard that Thai sticks were dipped in opium, and I hate to be the one to ruin that rumor for you, but it just simply is not true. The historians who wrote the definitive book on this call the opium story an urban myth, flat out. And when you look at it, it falls apart fast. Opium was more expensive than the premium weed it was supposedly being wasted on. Dipping hundreds of thousands of sticks would have cost a fortune. And soaking dried buds in a liquid is a great way to destroy your entire crop with mold. But forget the logistics for a second, and just look at what came after. If a whole generation of Americans really was smoking opium-soaked weed every weekend, there would be a trail. People getting hooked on opiates, people turning up in emergency rooms, and none of that ever showed up. And you do not have to take anybody's word for it either, because it actually got tested. In 1977, a case reached the Wisconsin Supreme Court where agents were certain they'd seized a shipment of opium-laced Thai sticks. So they sent them off to a lab and had them analyzed. What came back was marijuana and hashish. No opium in them at all. Now, the closest that story ever gets to true is hash oil. Because some sticks really did get dipped in it, and anybody who smoked one of those was not imagining the extra kick. But hash oil is just concentrated weed. It is the same plant, made stronger. That is nowhere near opium. And could some guy somewhere have made a custom opium batch for a buyer who asked for it? On a market that size, probably. But that is one guy in a shed making something for one buyer. That is not what an entire country was shipping out. So how did a rumor like this even get started, you may ask? Well, it got started because the weed was just that good. Thai sticks were shockingly strong, and they were sticky with their own resin, and nothing in America came anywhere close to them. So people figured somebody must have put something in it. They couldn't accept that it was just weed doing that to them. And nobody could really correct them either, because even today, nobody can tell you exactly how these were made. Nobody wrote it down. The people who knew were farmers in villages who had no reason to explain themselves to anybody. So what's left is 4 different stories. The first one says the buds were tied fresh and left to sweat, curing inside their own resin. Then you've got a version where the bundles got wrapped in fan leaves and buried underground for a month. Another one has them getting dipped, either in hash oil or in sugar water. And then there's the people who were actually buying them back in the 70s, who'll tell you it was none of that. Just pressed bud on a stick, and everything else got added later. So now that we got that out the way, let's talk about where this stuff was actually coming from. The finest Thai stick came out of northeastern Thailand, up on a high plateau called Aizan. Now, Aizan is its own world. It's the poorest part of the country, it's rural, and the people there are ethnically Lao rather than Thai. So the most famous Thai weed in history came from the part of Thailand that's the least Thai. And that Lao connection matters, because the thing separating Thailand from Laos is the Mekong River, and a river doesn't separate people, it feeds them. Villages sat on both banks. The families on one side were related to the families on the other, and they passed the same seeds back and forth for generations. So when the world started calling this Thai weed, half of it was actually growing in Laos, from the same stock, planted by the same families. Not all of them were equal though, because the families around a place called Nakhon Phanom, on the Thai bank, were putting out the best weed on that entire river, and everybody in the trade knew it. Now this whole region sits inside what people call the Golden Triangle, where Thailand, Laos, and Myanmar all meet in the mountains. It has steep hills, thick jungles, hardly any roads, and barely any government presence at all, which is exactly why nobody could get in there to stop anything that was going on. Now the weed itself was nothing like what we've got today. It wasn't bred or engineered by anybody. It was pure equatorial sativa, growing the way it always had. As tall, skinny plants with long, thin leaves that took forever to grow. A single one of these needed 14 to 20 weeks to finish flowering, and some of them even needed longer than that, which means one mistake could cost you an entire season. And that's exactly why those farming families were doing something most of the world hadn't caught on to yet. You see, cannabis comes in male and female plants, and it's only the females that produce the bud you actually want. If you let a male into that field and it pollinates them, every one of those females stops making flower and starts making seeds, which is something you don't want happening if you're growing it. So to prevent that from happening, they walked their rows and pulled every male plant before it could do anything, which left the females putting everything they had into the bud. And that little trick makes seedless weed. So if we're being honest here, Thai farmers were doing it by hand generations before American growers ever figured it out. And that head start makes a lot more sense once you know what cannabis actually was over there. It wasn't a drug you scored. It was a plant you cooked with. And they even had a word for it. They called it ganja, and in Thailand, the word comes from Sanskrit. People used it as medicine and food, most famously boat noodle soup and chicken soup. So, with that being said, generations on generations of Thai families grew up around this plant, which is exactly why they knew it better than anybody else. So what did it actually do to you, you may ask? Well, pure Thai sativa produced an intensely cerebral, energetic, long-lasting high that got close to psychedelic. And it was nothing like the seedy Mexican brick weed most Americans were used to. A DEA agent back in 1967 called it the Cuban cigar of the marijuana world. Now about the potency, I have to be honest with you on this one. There was no lab testing back then, so every number you see attached to Thai landrace today, usually somewhere in the 15 to 20% range, is a modern guess made looking backward. But what we can say for certain is that at the time, smokers across America agreed it was the best and most expensive weed you could buy, and it sat right at the top of that list next to Acapulco Gold, Panama Red, and Colombian Gold. And almost everything we know about how it got here comes from one book, called Thai Stick, Surfers, Scammers, and the Untold Story of the Marijuana Trade. And the untold story in that title is really about how it got here. 1,000 tons of Thai stick left that country between 1968 and 1972, most of it on sailboats crewed by Southern California surfers. And if you look at the profit margins here, you can see why they took the risk. A kilo of this cost about $3 at the farm in Aizan. and that same kilo sold for $4,000 in an American city in the early 70s. So how does something that dominant just disappear, you may wonder? Well, the honest answer is a stack of things hit it at once. The first one was the crackdown. Through the late 70s and into the 80s, the American State Department funded and pressured Thailand into a war on its own marijuana crop. A new law in 1979 jacked the penalties up to between 2 and 15 years in prison, with enormous fines on top. Then, the Golden Triangle moved on. It pivoted to a harder drug, and later Thailand's own drug crisis became something else. And in the places where marijuana got wiped out the hardest, harder drugs walked straight into the empty space. But the thing that actually killed the plant was much simpler. Growing moved west, and it moved indoors under lights, and fast-flowering Afghan indica genetics arrived. Now think about a pure Thai sativa in that world. 14 to 20 weeks of flowering, enormous height, airy buds, against a plant that finishes in 8 weeks and hides in a closet. If you're a grower, that's not a decision, it's arithmetic. Indica hybrids simply outcompeted the long-haul tropical sativas, and crossbreeding diluted whatever pure landrace was left. And sadly after that, the name left with it. Because by around 1982, the real ones were basically gone from the American market. A Thai stick meant whatever the guy selling it wanted it to mean, so people were tying low-grade weed to sticks and charging a premium, and buyers had no way of telling the difference. But the good thing is the genetics didn't disappear. They got absorbed. And they're sitting inside strains you've smoked. Start with Haze. The original Haze was bred around Santa Cruz in the early 70s by the Hayes brothers, who crossed a stack of land races together. People usually list the parents as Colombian, Mexican, South Indian, and Thai. And it's specifically the Thai that contributed that citrusy, electric, long flowering character. Haze went on to become the backbone of Super Silver Haze, Jack Herer, and Amnesia Haze. Then, Northern Lights, one of the most influential indicas ever made, is widely described as an Afghan landrace crossed with a Thai sativa. And then, there's Blueberry. DJ Short built it in Oregon in the late 70s, and he built it on Thai genetics. He used a plant called Highland Thai, which people also called Juicy Fruit Thai. He used another one called Purple Thai. And then he brought Afghani in on top of both of them. That one project founded the entire Blue family. Chocolate Thai deserves its own mention too. It's a Thai landrace that smelled like roasted cocoa and coffee. It's a legend in its own right, and it mostly survives now through hybrids like Chocolope. So after all that crossbreeding, does the real thing still exist, you may ask? And the honest answer is, mostly no. The real thing, the way it was sold in the 70s, is gone. And a lot of people will tell you the original plant doesn't exist anymore in any form worth calling the same plant. One writer who's lived in Thailand for over 20 years says he's never seen a leaf of it in the Northeast, where it used to grow everywhere. But there are people out there fighting to save it. Because landrace seed banks still source seeds from traditional farmers in Isan and Laos, selling lines under names like Isan Thai, Mango Thai, Highland Thai, and Lao Gold. And Thai seed conservators are working to preserve the regional lines that are left. The hand-tied form came back too. Around 2013, a grower posting on Instagram started tying sticks the old way again, and people went crazy for it. And back home in Thailand, the story went full circle. Because on June 9th, 2022, Thailand became the first country in Asia to decriminalize cannabis, pulling it off the narcotics list entirely. Thousands of dispensaries opened almost overnight. But the rollout was basically unregulated, and in 2025 the government reversed course, reclassifying cannabis flower as a controlled herb and restricting sales to medical use with a prescription. Thousands of those shops have already closed. And the free-for-all was over. So think about where all of this actually ended up. Those farmers on the mountainside spent generations perfecting a plant, growing it in the sun the way their families always had, and that plant is basically gone now. What replaced it grows indoors, under lights, in a controlled room, and finishes in 8 weeks. The country that produced the original just closed the door on it again. And the only piece of Thai stick that really survived is the shape of the thing. Bud tied to a stick with string, sitting in a glass tube on a dispensary shelf with a $40 price tag on it, made by a company that has never been anywhere near the Mekong River.